So what is going on in this part of Bhagavatam is that Aditi, the mother of the demigods, has become morose because her sons, the demigods, have had to leave the heavenly worlds. This happened because the demons under Bali Maharaj had become very powerful. And because they had become powerful, they were able to overcome the demigods. The demigods wanted to fight, but they were told by Brihaspati that this was not the right approach and that they should leave the heavenly planets. And so they did. When her children, the demigods, because Aditi is the mother of all the demigods, by the way, uh, Diti is the mother of the demons. So you've got Diti and Aditi. Both are sisters and they're co-wives of Kasyap Muni. So Aditi is the mother of the demigods, and Diti is the mother of the demons. And in this case, the demons became powerful, and they were able to eject the demigods from the heavenly planets. So the demigods did not fight, they simply left. And as a result, Aditi is morose. She's very disturbed that her children are no longer in the heavenly world. She can't associate with them. Kasyapa comes in and he notices that his wife, Aditi, is sad. And he asks her questions on what might have happened. And eventually she says, no, nothing inauspicious has happened, but I'm unhappy because I don't have the association of my children, the demigods. I'm here alone. So Kasyap Muni, he explains to Aditi the nature of material life, that sometimes things are your way and sometimes they're not. Sometimes you are able to get things and sometimes they're taken away from you. And one should tolerate these things and not be disturbed. This solution for Aditi doesn't click for her. She's not able or ready to take this as the solution for her plight. She says, my dear husband, isn't it possible that somehow or other I could get some um, vow or some kind of ritual I could do to please the Supreme Lord, and he would bring my children, the demigods, back to the heavenly worlds? Isn't that possible? So Kasyap Muni sees that his wife is not really ready for renunciation or for giving up connection to material things. Instead, she persists in her desire to be able to associate with her children. And so Kasyap then understands that and he decides to give her an option. And so that's the nature of today's discussion. How sometimes people come to devotion via material desire. We understand that material desire is not the best thing, that material desire is actually a, a waste of time, and material desires will always be to some extent fulfilled, to some extent not fulfilled. And the more we try to fulfill all of our material desires, the more we lose the chance for spiritual life. However, uh, very few people are pure. And when we start devotional service, we usually come to devotional service with a good bit of material desire as well. So we need to uh, push forward in devotional service and at the same time know that eventually our material desires will be overcome and we will be more fully focused on simply pleasing the Supreme Lord, which is the real goal of life. So This section today will be kind of around the theme of coming to devotion via material desire. Okay, so as we've been discussing here, Kasyapa Muni, he understands that his wife Aditi is sad because all of her children have been forced to leave the heavenly planets. After first instructing Aditi about the temporary nature of the material world, the constant gain and loss of worldly events, his wife replies that still she would like her children back. At this, Kasyap instructs Aditi to perform the Payovrata ritual to please the Supreme Lord. When Aditi then performs Payovrata, she sees the Supreme and asks him to become her son. So, of course, as we know, this is chapter 16 and 17 and 18 are a lead up to eventually the appearance of Vamanadev. And Vamanadev will definitely fulfill this requirement that Aditi has, that she wants her children to come back from the hiding that they have gone into at the request or the suggestion of uh, uh, their spiritual master, not Brigu, but Brihaspati. That's what I'm trying to spit out there. Brihaspati. So their spiritual master, Brihaspati, suggested that they not fight at this time, but they leave the heavenly planets. It will be Vamanadev who restates the demigods back in their heavenly abode. What we know is that the world that we live in is a world that's constantly changing. And most people in our everyday world have come to this world with a specific material desire or some specific material desires. And because they have, they struggle most of their lives to fulfill various material desires. If we're simply trying to fulfill material desires, um, we lose out on the real purpose of life. The real purpose of life is not to fulfill our material desires, although that's what most people take as the real purpose of life. So here our verse today. We are doing this up on the screen here. Happy Agnayastu, Happy Agnayastu Velayam Nahuta Havishasati Tvayodvigna Dia Bhadre Proshite Mai Karhichit. So this is verse 8, and this verse translates to, O chaste and auspicious woman, when I left home for other places, were you in so much anxiety that you did not offer oblations of ghee into the fire? And here's the next verse. Yat Pujaya karma kama, yeah, Pujaya karma dughan yati lokan grihan vita brahmanognis chachai by Vishnu sarvadevatmano mukham. And this verse translates, by worshiping the fire, the brahmanas, a householder can achieve the desired goal of residing in the higher planets. For the sacrificial fire and the brahmanas are considered to be the mouth of Lord Vishnu, who is the supersoul of all the demigods. According to the Vedic system, a fire sacrifice is held in order to offer oblations of ghee, grains, fruits, flowers, and so on, so that Lord Vishnu may eat and be satisfied. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam Yome Bhakta Prayachti Tadaham Bhakti Upahritam Ashtami Prayatatmanha. One offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water, I will accept it. Therefore, all these items may be offered in the sacrificial fire, and Lord Vishnu will be satisfied. Similarly, Brahmana Bhojana. Feeding of the Brahmanas is also recommended, for when the Brahmanas eat sumptuous remnants of food after yajna, this is another way that Lord Vishnu himself eats. Therefore, the Vedic principles recommend that in every festival ceremony one offer oblations into the fire and give sumptuous food for the Brahmanas to eat. By such activities, a householder may be elevated to the heavenly planets and similar places in the higher planetary system. So we have now discussed this basic understanding here. And in seventh chapter of Bhagavad Gita, goodness, there, Chaturvidi Bhajanti Mam Jana Sukriti Arjuna Arto Jigyasya Artarti Jnana Jnani Cha Bharatarshava. O best among the Bharata, four kinds of pious men render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute truth. Here we have this basic understanding that we find some people are attracted directly to Krishna, but we see that such people are very rare. Mostly people are attracted to material desire, and they come to feel that maybe they should also pay some attention to the Supreme Lord. So when someone like this feels that they are pressed for a material desire to be fulfilled, they naturally turn to the Supreme Lord. And in the Bhagavad Gita here, in seventh chapter, text 16, we see that there are four kinds of pious men, and they are listed as the Arta, who is the one who is suffering, uh, the distress; Jigyasur, the inquisitive; Artarti, one who desires material gain; and Jnani, one who knows things as they are. So Aditi is in the category of Artarti, or maybe in Arta, she's distressed, but also she wants the boon or the material gain of having her children back in the heavenly worlds. So she's approaching the Supreme, but she's approaching the Supreme with a material desire. Kasyap first tries to dissuade her from being focused on material desire. When that fails, then he goes the next step of trying to convince her to perform the Payovrata Yagya, and the Payovrata Yagya will be what will purify her, and it will please the Supreme. She will be allowed then to come into contact with the Supreme, and then she will beg the Supreme for mercy to be able to come as her son. And as her son, as Vamanadev, Aditi will achieve the thing that she really wants. She wants her children to come back. And we know that Vamanadev will eventually strike a bargain with Bali Maharaj, who is currently the head of the demons and occupying the heavenly world. He will suggest that he wants simply 3 paces of land, but with those 3 paces of land, he will take away not only all the heavenly worlds, but everything in the universe, and even there's no place for him to put his third step. The result will be in the final wash that the demigods will indeed receive their kingdom back. So at this stage of this chapter, of chapter 16, mostly all we're getting is that Kasyap is offering various possibilities for why it is that Aditi feels morose. He understands his wife is not in a good mood. So he's asking why this is. And so this is what these questions that we have just been discussing, what they're coming from. They're coming from Kasyapa asking, why it is that his wife is unhappy. O chaste and auspicious woman, when I left home for other places, were you in so much anxiety that you did not offer oblations of ghee into the fire? Maybe she didn't perform fire sacrifices properly. Of course, this is not the issue. And then by worshiping the fire and the Brahmanas, a householder can achieve the desired goal of residing in the higher planets, where the sacrificial fire and the Brahmanas are considered to be the mouth of Lord Vishnu, who is the super soul of all the demigods. So after he goes through a checklist of several different items, then Aditi informs him that none of those things are the problem. The problem is that her children are no longer in the heavenly planets. Can he do something about it? So now we kind of get a sense of the overall flow of this section of Bhagavatam, which stretches out over 2, 3, or 4, something like that, whole chapters. So we first started off talking about how it was that the demigods came to lose their position in the heavenly planets by the power and prowess of Bali Maharaj. Then we find here that Aditi is morose. Kasyapa approaches her, tries to preach to her, and she requests instead that she gets some form of ritual that she can please the Supreme so that her material desire of being in association with her children can be reinstated. This becomes the Payovrata sacrifice, or the Payovrata Yagya, whatever you want to call it. And it consists of 12 days of subsisting only on milk and smearing your body with earth dug up by a boar and all these kind of things. Those will be listed in the later part of this chapter, what exactly the Payovrata Yagya is. And as Aditi follows it faithfully and completes it, then she finds that she meets the Supreme. And this is something that can happen at certain times, that when a person actually does meet the Supreme, at that time, at that time, they begin to realize that they are wasting an opportunity for associating with the Supreme on simply asking for a mundane benediction. This kind of thing happens in a number of places in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Someone starts out with a material desire and winds up actually coming in contact with the Supreme and becomes almost ashamed that they ask. Happens to Dhruva Maharaj. He's wanting a kingdom like his father. And when he meets the Supreme Lord at that time, he discovers that he's not really interested in the kingdom anymore. He's just ashamed that he asked for a material benediction when he could have been asking for pure devotional service. This is the nature of life, that if a person is sincere and has a tendency for devotion, uh, people come to devotional service through sometimes the side door of a particular material desire. Either someone is in distress or they want some material situation. So, as the seventh chapter of Bhagavad Gita tells us, the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and the jnani, those four are on the doorstep of devotional service. They are not yet at full unalloyed devotional service, but they're on their doorstep. They have a material desire and they're uh, fixated on that material desire. Higher than that is what we do in devotional service, where we still have material desires too, but we understand that these material desires are not the goal of life, and we're not fixated on them, although we may still uh, make efforts to try to fulfill them here and there. So that's the higher stage of devotional service. And then higher than that is where you are free from all material desires altogether. So you're no longer trying to get something accomplished in this material world to either uh, create a nice situation for yourself or some kind of um, uh, illustrious position for yourself. Okay, I'm going to pause at this point and see if there are any questions, and if so, I'll answer. If not, then we'll kind of proceed a little further down this road.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. Um, yeah, I just wanted to get a little clarification about Aditi's mentality. You know, you were saying that one of the four types who approach Krishna are those who they want something, but you know they don't realize that what they're asking for is, you know, temporary. You know, as devotees, you know, even though we have material desires, we know the folly of those desires. So was Aditi in that category of realizing that her desires were material and realizing the folly of them, but just, you know, couldn't shed those desires anyway? Or was she ignorant of that?
I don't know for absolute sure, but it seems to me that we get more of the indication that Aditi was serious about material desires. That's why I place her in this category of being a Sukritina. In Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada kind of gives us a layering, if we could call it that, of progressive devotional service. On the top are the Mahatmas. The Mahatmas are those who simply try to please the Supreme, and they are not interested in material desires. However, these are rare, you know, Mahatmas are rare. Then we have those who are kind of engaging in devotional service, who are trying to please the Supreme. They know they still have material desires, but they're kind of tolerating those material desires and trying to come to the stage where they're not going to fulfill them. And then below them are the Sukratinas, who have material desires and are actually committed to those material desires more than they are to the Supreme Lord. But at the same time, they know there is the Supreme Lord. And because they know about the Supreme Lord and they trust in his power, they go to the Supreme Lord to fulfill the material desire rather than going to a demigod or doing what most people do. And that's just working hard like an ass in the material world to fulfill the material desire. So, then below them, we have people, you know, a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's the point that I'm making here, that she appears to be a Sukratina, someone who still has material desires, uh, but understands that the Supreme Lord is there and approaches the Supreme Lord for material desires. In Brooklyn, we're in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and we're discussing this verse, you know, akama savakamo va mokshakama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yat uh, Purusham Param or something like that. Hakama Savakamo Va Moksha Kama Udare Di Tirvena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param. That's the verse. Whether one has no material desire, whether one has all material desire, or whether one wants liberation, still one should worship the Supreme Personality of God, Tivrena, with great vigor and focus. Why? Because if you approach the Supreme for a material desire, the Supreme will either purify you of the material desire or allow you to have the material desire, but in a way that you will gradually become detached. If, however, people approach the demigods for the same purpose, the demigods, there's no such guarantee. You will not become detached. You will continue to be attached to the same material desire over and over. Yeah, I have a question. I think it came from Gail on the chat line here. That is considered a sukratina. Let me see if I can pull the whole thing up. Yeah, I mean, Krishna does appear sometimes to people who are not on the most exalted level. There's nothing to say that someone has to be a pure devotee before Krishna appears to them. But generally, Krishna does not appear to people who are not pure devotees. In this case, he chose to appear. And the reason he chose to appear is because she performed a specific yagya to please him. So he appeared in a Vishnu form, and she was following the directions given by her husband Kasyapa. So having done that, then she pleased the Supreme, and he appeared to her directly, and then she could ask for her son, for the Supreme to appear as her son. Even to have the Supreme appear as your son is kind of on the borderline between a spiritual and material desire, because to associate with the Supreme as your son, that is actually a kind of rasa. But at the same time, if you're in the material world, you want to bring the Supreme Lord to the material world just so you can have him as a son. That's not exactly a fully spiritual desire, but the Supreme Lord reciprocates with it, and he did with also Devaki, same kind of thing. Devaki and Vasudeva wanted the Supreme Lord as their son, and so he reciprocated with that. He came to the material world and became their child. But ultimately, we want to please the Supreme Lord, whatever it is. Whatever the Supreme Lord wants, we want to please him. And this, I will end with this kind of note here, that this verse is described in Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, verse 6. Savai pumsam parodamo yato bhaktir hokshaje ahoitakiya pratiyata yayatma suprasidati. So this describes that the supreme occupation or dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. And here we have, as we were talking about a minute ago, the Vedic definition of what true devotional service is, or what true spiritual desire is. It must be personally self-motivated, and it must be uninterrupted. And by not motivated to the self, Prabhupada describes that there is selfish consciousness where we just think about ourselves. There's extended selfishness where we just think about our family. There's larger extended selfishness where we just think about our community. There's larger still extended selfishness where we just think about our nation. And there's larger still selfish interests where we just think about humanity at large. So all these stages are progressively less selfish, but ultimately the highest stage is to please the Supreme, and not either think about just pleasing my body or just pleasing my family or just pleasing my community or just pleasing my nation or just pleasing humanity. We really want to be thinking about pleasing the Supreme Lord. So any final questions on this as we're drawing to a close here?
Yeah, I needed to, I think, clarify my last question and follow up with something else you said in your answer. My last question, I was curious that, Aditi would have been so focused on her purely material desire when she had Kashyapa Muni, who is so exalted in his realizations, right by her side. But then I was trying to maybe answer my own question by saying, well, maybe it's because even though she did have such association, that doesn't stop her from having free will. So, I'm just surprised that she has Kashyapa Muni as her husband, yet she would have been so kind of oblivious about her material desires. About the I should have said so oblivious about the spiritual goal.
Right. It's a long road. The process of coming out of the material world requires a lot of purification. And it comes easier and faster to some and slower to others, as we can see that the attachments, how great they are and how much sin there is in the background. For Aditi, there wasn't much sin in the background because she's obviously a demigoddess, so you don't get there by being a sinful person. She must have been very pious. However, that doesn't mean that she couldn't have material desires. We see that in the heavenly worlds, often people do have extreme material desires. That's why they go there to begin with. Many people target as the goal of their life to enter the heavenly worlds, and the Vedas instruct you on exactly how to do that if that's what you want to do. We see that in our everyday modern religions, most people are targeted at heaven. They think that the purpose of their religion is so they can go to heaven. And their conception of going to heaven is to enjoy there. And this tallies completely with the Vedic system that, yes, if you go to heaven, you'll enjoy. That's why people go there. But again, that's not the goal of life. The goal of life is one step beyond that, to go to the spiritual world, where the purpose of the spiritual world is not to enjoy heavenly, rewards for a life of pious activity. The real purpose of life is to go to the spiritual world where one serves the Supreme Lord without motivation and without interruption. If we're not ready to do that, we wouldn't be happy there. Um, we would feel stifled in the spiritual world. So, therefore, we will stay here in the material world. In the heavenly world, you're not stifled either. You can have all the material desire you want. However, in the heavenly worlds, the prerequisite is you have to be very pious to have your material desires fulfilled in the heavenly world. So,
Okay.
most of the heavenly demigods, they do have extreme material desires. And we see that demonstrated in much of Vedic literature. There are a few exceptions, but generally that's what we see. And that's why they get themselves into trouble.
Yeah, so I guess her material desires. She didn't. I mean, for one thing, you made the distinction between having sinful desires and material desires. So in the heavenly world, they're pretty free from sin, but they well, two things. I mean, to get to the heavenly world, do you have to have like zero sinful desires? You can have very intense material desires, but would that mean?
Not always the case. Uh, Usually, that's the way it works. You have to have done a lot of pious activity. However, in some cases, a person may go through some purification, some extreme purification to enter heaven because they have some pious activities. At the same time, they may have some disqualifying activities. And so they go through a extreme purification to get there. And then they wind up in the heavenly worlds. But more or less that's the equation that if you go to the heavenly worlds, you get there by going through material. I mean, get there by performing material pious activities.
So therefore, Kashyapa Muni, although I thought he was considered a very exalted, spiritually exalted soul. So, that's why I was wondering how come his association didn't impact Aditi.
Right. He's not considered, on the level of Narada Muni or something like that. He apparently also has some material desires as well. But he at least understood technically from a Vedic point of view what the highest goal was. And therefore, he was willing to instruct his wife Aditi, but she was not really willing to accept those instructions. Same thing happens when Narada Muni tries to express the same thing to Dhruva Maharaj, who also fails to accept his advice and asks for how he can get his material desire, which is to have a kingdom greater than his father, how to get that material desire fulfilled. And Narada Muni tells him in exactly the same way that Kasyapa is telling Aditi here. Narada Muni sees that Dhruva is not willing to listen to the real truth, which is to forget about material desires, just focus on spiritual life. That instruction is Dhruva's not ready for it. In a similar way, Aditi's not ready for the instruction of just understand that material life will always be up and down, that you'll lose things and you'll gain things, and you shouldn't be focused on that. You should engage in pleasing the Lord. But Aditi doesn't accept that either. So both of them get a plan B. And for Dhruva, the plan B is to go to Vrindavan and meditate, and then the Supreme Lord will fulfill your desire. He'll appear to you and fulfill your desire, which of course is what happens to Dhruva. And a very similar parallel thing is happening here to Aditi. She is performing the Payovrata, and the Supreme Lord again appears to her too. And in both cases, when the Supreme Lord appears, both of them are Aditi can't speak for some time. She's overwhelmed, and you can imagine that if the Supreme actually appeared to you, and you weren't so covered over that you would be blown away by the experience, and that's what happens to both of them. Dhruva then becomes ashamed of his material desire, but the Supreme Lord fulfills it anyway, and Aditi. Gets the chance to see the Supreme Lord, and he agrees to become her child. So in both cases, the material desire is fulfilled, and it's fulfilled by the Supreme Lord. But at the same time, the act of meeting the Supreme Lord has lifted, I believe, both characters above the material view that they had previous to the whole episode. So this is why uh, oftentimes the door from material desire uh, the, uh, the pathway of material desire with the view to get that material desire fulfilled by the Supreme Lord brings one above material desire at a certain point.
You said that's why?
Yeah. So the material desire path, although usually entangling, because it's connected to the Supreme, then a person can. I'm not saying always will, but a person can, especially if they're uh, rigorous in performing activities to please the Supreme Lord, so the Supreme Lord will fulfill that desire. If they're laissez-faire about trying to please the Supreme Lord so that he will please their material desire, then the whole thing may not happen at all. But in both cases, Dhruva underwent extreme austerities to please the Supreme Lord. He was pleasing the Supreme Lord with a purpose beyond just pleasing the Supreme Lord. He had a purpose beyond. That purpose beyond was, of course, material. He wanted a kingdom. Similarly, that's what Aditi was doing too. She was pleasing the Supreme Lord, performing the Payovrata, sacrifice. She was pleasing him. This was told to her by her husband. So she was pleasing the Supreme Lord. Again, she had a desire beyond just pleasing the Supreme Lord. But in both cases, after, the Supreme Lord appeared, it softened the connection to material desire for both parties. For Dhruva, he became actually ashamed of having asked the Supreme Lord for material things. I'm not sure if that exact same thing can be said about Aditi. I haven't read this pastime closely enough to confidently make that statement.
So you're saying that even though in both cases their desire for something material was really intense, but because their endeavors to please the Lord, even though those endeavors were for something material, but because their endeavors were also intense and not, as you said, laissez-faire, for that reason, Krishna was inspired to appear to both of them.
Yes.
For that reason.
Right.
And really quick, I'm sorry, Maharaj, but just real quick, the one last thing is, I don't understand why a desire to have the Lord as one's son, whether we're talking about in Aditi's case or in Devaki's case, why would that be considered material, or at least not purely spiritual?
Right. Well, what I'm suggesting here is they're asking the Supreme Lord to come to the material world to be their son. That's different than wanting to purify yourself to go back to Godhead and be in the rasa of parental affection, which is called, there's not Sakiras, but
Vatsalya?
Vatsalya ras, right. So when someone wants the desire to have the Supreme Lord as their child, but they are trying to purify themselves to go back to the spiritual world, that's one thing. That's actually straight ahead a spiritual desire. But here, they're asking the Supreme Lord to come to the material world and be their son in the material world, which, again, we're getting at the point where this is gray territory. It's pretty close to a complete spiritual desire because it is connected with the Supreme Lord. But at the same time, there's this kind of, why would the Supreme Lord need to come to be your son, in the material world? He's already got so many people as his parents, but that's in the spiritual world. You should rather go there.
Yeah, because you see, this comes up. It reminds me of something that came up for me this morning before the class, which is that those who want, there's 5 types of liberation. One of them is, I think, samipya is when you want to live, side by side with the Lord in His association, and so, so I'm just wondering why, the 3 things that a pure devotee wants. He wants relationship, he wants service, and he wants the Lord's association. So whether we're talking about in this case where, somebody wants Krishna or the Lord as their child, or we're talking about somebody who wants that kind of liberation where you get to live side by side with the Lord, it's difficult to understand why those types, why wouldn't a devotee want that kind of want that kind of liberation? I don't know, maybe like you said.
5 types of liberation. One of them is never accepted by a devotee, and that is, the
Sayuja, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are also somewhat considered materialistic to some extent. So actually, the devotee doesn't want any of those things. He just simply wants to please the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord can decide what will happen to the devotee. Does he continue on in the material world? Does he come to the spiritual world? Does he go to the heavenly hell? And so this is, again, what you're seeing is a kind of spectrum of more materialistically and less materialistically devotional attitude. And there will be this kind of thing. So we don't condemn people for wanting to become the father of the Supreme or the mother of the Supreme and having come to the material world. But at the same time, we also recognize that that this is not really what we hold up as the high water mark of what we should pin our compass to.
Okay, yeah, it's very clear now. I think there's, as you said, there's a spectrum. So the ones who want the 5 kinds of liberation, their concern, even though it's their desire is spiritually connected, but they're more concerned with their own satisfaction than they are with Krishna's. Whereas the pure devotees is just Krishna's desire comes first. Maybe with those who want any of the 5 kinds of liberation, especially the 4 kinds, their own desire takes more precedence than maybe Krishna's desire, even though both are there.
So we don't again condemn people with the other.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't hold it up as the center of the target either. So
right. Okay. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for taking all this time.